She says you've changed. You're not as warm anymore. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not chasing her eyes anymore. You've changed the game entirely. And that terrifies her. Because when someone stops needing your validation, when they stop performing for your attention, when they no longer live to be desired, they become dangerous. For years, society taught you a simple equation. Being desired equals being valuable. The more eyes on you, the more worth you possess. The more someone wants you, the more alive you feel. But here's what they never told you about that equation. It's rigged. Every time you lived for someone else's gaze, you lost a piece of yourself. Every performance, every calculated move to seem more attractive, more desirable, more wanted. It was all feeding a machine that was never designed to satisfy you. It was designed to control you. When you step out of that trap, when you stop dancing for applause, something shifts. People notice, and they don't like what they see. They call it cold. But what if I told you that what they're calling coldness is actually your awakening from emotional slavery? What if the very thing that makes them uncomfortable is the thing that finally sets you free? Here's the first truth most people never realize. When you want to control how others see you, you're actually being controlled by them. Think about it. She used to find you attractive because you needed her. Your validation came through her eyes. Your worth was measured by her desire. But the moment you stopped needing that reflection, the moment you became whole without her gaze, you became incomprehensible to her. And incomprehensible people are dangerous people because they can't be manipulated. Let me paint you a picture. There's a man, let's call him David. For 32 years, David lived his entire life through other people's eyes. Every conversation was a performance. Every outfit was a calculation. Every text message was crafted to get a specific response. He was addicted to reflection. The desire to be seen, desired, touched. It became his drug. Every compliment was a hit of dopamine. Every interested glance was a dose of worth. Every message notification promised another fix. But like any addiction, it required more and more to feel the same high. David found himself exhausting himself to maintain an image that wasn't even him. He was performing a version of himself that he thought others wanted to see. And slowly, quietly, he disappeared behind the performance. Until one day, something in him broke. Not broke like shattered. Broke like opened. Pause here and take a breath. Is this what you've been carrying all along? This weight of constant performance? This exhaustion of always being on? This fear that if you stop performing, you'll disappear? Now, before we go further, let's clarify something crucial. Jung talked about desexualizing the mind, and this doesn't mean becoming sexless or emotionless. It means freeing your sexual energy from the compulsive need for external validation. Think of it like this. Instead of your life force constantly flowing outward, seeking approval, seeking to be wanted, seeking to be chosen, you redirect that energy inward, into creativity, into presence, into your own sovereignty. You stop living to be desired, and you start living to be alive. Desire itself isn't the problem. The problem is being enslaved by it. The problem is when your entire sense of self depends on someone else wanting you. When you desexualize your mind, you don't lose the capacity for connection. You lose the compulsive need for it, and that changes everything. Here's where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes crucial to understanding this transformation. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the part of yourself that you've learned to hide because it doesn't fit with your conscious image of who you think you should be. For people caught in the validation trap, the shadow often contains your authentic self, The parts of you that might not be universally appealing, the thoughts that might not be socially acceptable, the desires that might not be conventionally attractive. You've been hiding these parts of yourself because you learned that being authentic was risky. Being real meant the possibility of rejection. So you created a persona, a mask, that was designed to be lovable, acceptable, desirable. But here's what Jung understood. The shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It just grows stronger in the darkness. And all that energy you spend maintaining your persona, all that effort you put into being what others want you to be, is energy that's not available for actually living your life. The process of desexualizing your mind involves integrating your shadow, accepting and embracing the parts of yourself that you've been hiding. This includes your independence, your need for solitude, your capacity to say no, your ability to exist without external validation. These qualities might make you seem cold to people who are used to your performance. But they're not cold. They're authentic. Here's what happens when you stop performing. People get uncomfortable because a person who doesn't need their validation is a person they can't control. A person who isn't desperately seeking approval is a person who might actually see them clearly. A person who has found their worth within themselves is a person who doesn't need to take worth from others. And in a world built on emotional manipulation, on the constant exchange of validation for compliance, a truly independent person is a threat to the entire system. You used to be the man everyone liked, but you weren't yourself. You were a carefully constructed image designed to be palatable, attractive, non-threatening. You were a people pleaser wearing the mask of confidence, and it was killing you. The moment you stopped living to impress others, something shifted in how people saw you. Suddenly, you were different, distant, cold. But here's the brutal truth they don't want to admit. You weren't becoming cold. You were simply stopping the performance. And without your performance, they had to face something uncomfortable about themselves. Jung often spoke in images, and here's one that captures this transformation perfectly. You were once like a tiger, magnificent and powerful, but chained by the gaze of spectators. Every move you made was for their entertainment. Every roar was for their approval. But when you break those chains, when you stop performing for the crowd, you don't become less powerful. You become a silent warrior. Silent warriors don't announce their strength. They don't perform their worth. They simply exist in their power, and that existence speaks louder than any performance ever could. The crowd doesn't like silent warriors because they can't predict them, can't control them, can't use them for entertainment. So they call them cold. Let me tell you about Sarah's ex-boyfriend. She dated him for 2 years, and for those 2 years, he was exactly what she wanted. Attentive, eager to please, constantly seeking her approval. Then something changed. He stopped texting her constantly. He stopped dropping everything when she called. He stopped needing her validation to feel good about himself. Sarah's first thought wasn't good for him. It was, what's wrong with him? Because in her mind, love meant need. Connection meant dependence. Caring meant constantly proving your care through anxiety and performance. When he became calm, centered, present without being needy, she couldn't recognize it as love anymore. She called him cold, distant, said he'd changed, and she was right. He had changed. He'd stopped being manipulatable. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like a mirror. Here's what makes a desexualized mind so dangerous to others. It's free. Free from the need to impress. Free from the compulsion to perform. Free from the anxiety of not being enough. And free people make unfree people very, very uncomfortable. Because your freedom holds up a mirror to their bondage. Your peace highlights their chaos. Your self-sufficiency exposes their neediness. Your calm presence makes their desperate performances look exactly like what they are: desperate. They call you cold because they can't call you controlled. They call you distant because they can't call you dependent. They call you different because they can't call you desperate. And in a world that runs on desperation, a truly free person is revolutionary. What you're experiencing is what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from the collective expectations and projections that have shaped your identity. Individuation isn't comfortable. It's actually one of the most challenging psychological processes a person can undertake, because it requires you to differentiate yourself from the collective, to stand apart from the crowd, to be yourself even when that makes others uncomfortable. Most people never individuate. They live their entire lives as reflections of what others want them to be, as products of social conditioning, as performers on a stage they never chose to be on. But some people reach a point where the cost of conformity becomes too high, where the exhaustion of constant performance becomes unbearable, where the emptiness of validation seeking becomes intolerable. These people begin the process of individuation, often without even realizing what they're doing. They start listening to their own inner voice instead of the chorus of external expectations. They start making choices based on their authentic desires rather than their calculated attempts to please others. And the world responds to this individuation with confusion, frustration, and often anger, because an individuated person is unpredictable. They can't be controlled through conventional means. They don't respond to manipulation in the expected ways. They've developed what Jung called a relationship with the unconscious, an inner compass that guides them toward authenticity rather than approval. This is why people call you cold when you individuate. It's not because you lack feeling, but because your feelings are no longer available for others to manipulate. It's not because you don't care, but because you've learned to care about yourself as much as you care about others. Now you can love, but not to be loved back. This isn't indifference. This is the highest form of love. Love without agenda. When you love someone without needing them to love you back in a specific way, you give them the greatest gift possible: the freedom to be themselves. You're no longer trying to extract validation from them. You're no longer performing to keep their attention. You're simply present, offering your authentic self without demands. This kind of love is rare. It's so rare that when people encounter it, they often don't recognize it. They expect love to come with conditions, with needs, with the familiar dance of give and take that keeps both people slightly anxious and constantly performing. But love without need, that's unfamiliar territory. You are present now, but not to impress. Your presence isn't a strategy anymore. It's not calculated to get a certain response or create a particular impression. You show up as you are, not as who you think others want you to be. This authentic presence has a quality that performance can never achieve. It's sustainable. You're not exhausting yourself trying to maintain an image. You're not constantly monitoring yourself to make sure you're saying the right things, making the right faces, creating the right impression. You're just there, fully there, present without agenda. And people can feel the difference, even if they can't name it. It's not loneliness that hurts. It's the addiction to noise that's dying. For so long, you filled every silence with distraction, every empty moment with stimulation, every quiet space with the noise of seeking validation. But now, in the silence, you're discovering something profound. You exist even when no one is watching. Your worth doesn't disappear when the notifications stop. Your value doesn't evaporate when no one is paying attention to you. In fact, it's in the silence that you finally meet yourself, the person you are when no one is looking, the thoughts you think when no one is listening, the dreams you dream when no one is judging. This is where your real life begins. When you're no longer afraid of emptiness, you begin to create real space. Space for authentic thoughts, space for genuine feelings, space for true connections. Before, your mind was cluttered with the constant noise of seeking approval. Every thought was filtered through, what will others think? Every feeling was measured against, is this attractive? Every action was calculated for maximum positive response. But now, with all that noise cleared away, there's room for something new, room for creativity that comes from your soul, not from what you think will impress others, room for connections that feed you rather than drain you, room for a life that's actually yours. Take a moment here. Can you feel that space opening up inside you? Can you sense the possibility of a life that's actually yours? Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, separate from the collective expectations and projections that have shaped your identity since childhood. It's not comfortable. Rebirth never is. You're shedding skin that no longer fits, but that has protected you for so long that removing it feels dangerous. You're outgrowing relationships that were built on your old, people-pleasing self, which means some relationships might not survive your transformation. You're discovering parts of yourself that were buried under years of performance. Parts that might not be universally appealing. Parts that might make some people uncomfortable. Some people in your life won't understand this transformation. They might try to pull you back into the old patterns, the old dynamics where you were predictable and manageable. They might use guilt, manipulation, or emotional blackmail to try to get you to return to the version of yourself that served their needs. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you're not the person they fell in love with, not the friend they remember, not the son or daughter they raised. And they'll be right. You're not that person anymore. That person was a performance, a carefully constructed character designed to be lovable, acceptable, manageable. But you got tired of being a character in someone else's story. You got exhausted by the constant effort of being who others wanted you to be. You realized that all the approval in the world couldn't fill the emptiness of not knowing yourself. So you made the terrifying decision to stop performing and start being. This is who you actually are. This is what you're like when you're not trying to be anything for anyone. This is your authentic self, freed from the constraints of others' expectations. And yes, this person might be different from who they thought you were. This person might have boundaries where the old you had none. This person might have preferences that don't align with their needs. This person might be independent where the old you was dependent. But this person is real in a way that the performance never was. One way I've been performing for others' approval is, what would it look like to stop that performance? What am I afraid would happen if I showed up authentically instead? Sit with that truth, because that's where your freedom begins. In alchemical terms, what you've undergone is the transformation from lead to gold. Not literally, of course, but psychologically. You've transmuted the base metal of validation seeking into the gold of self-sufficiency. This process, which Jung studied extensively, involves what alchemists called the nigredo, the dark night of the soul where everything you thought you knew about yourself dissolves. This is followed by the albedo, the whitening phase where new awareness begins to emerge. Finally comes the rubedo, the reddening phase where integration occurs, and you emerge transformed. You've been through the darkness of realizing that your entire identity was built on others' approval. You've experienced the dissolution of the persona you worked so hard to maintain. You've faced the uncomfortable truth that much of what you thought was your personality was actually just adaptive behavior designed to get needs met. But now you're emerging from that darkness with something precious: authentic selfhood. You're no longer dependent on others for your sense of worth. You're no longer enslaved to the opinions and expectations of people who don't even know who you really are. You're no longer performing a version of yourself designed to be universally appealing. You've found your center, your core, the part of yourself that exists independent of external validation. And from this center, you can engage with the world in a completely different way. A desexualized mind isn't cold. It's free. Free to the point of being unmanipulatable. Free to the point of being unpredictable. Free to the point of being truly dangerous to systems built on control and emotional manipulation. When someone calls you cold, they're not describing your temperature. They're not making an observation about your capacity for warmth or your ability to connect with others. They're describing their inability to use you. They're describing their frustration at not being able to control you through the granting or withdrawal of approval. They're expressing their confusion at encountering someone who doesn't need their validation to feel whole. When someone says you've changed, they're not mourning who you were. They're mourning their access to who you were pretending to be. They're grieving the loss of someone they could manipulate, someone they could control, someone who would sacrifice their own well-being to maintain the relationship. When someone says you're distant, they're not measuring physical space. They're measuring the distance between who you actually are and who they need you to be for their own comfort and convenience. What they're calling coldness is actually the absence of performative warmth. What they're experiencing as distance is actually the presence of healthy boundaries. What they're interpreting as change is actually the emergence of your authentic self. And yes, your authentic self might be less accommodating than your performed self. Your real personality might be more complex than your people-pleasing persona. Your actual needs and desires might not align perfectly with their expectations. But this is what psychological health looks like. This is what emotional maturity sounds like. This is what an authentic relationship requires. You're part of a quiet revolution happening in bedrooms and coffee shops and therapy offices around the world. A revolution of people who are tired of living for applause. People who are exhausted by performance. People who are ready to meet themselves without the filter of others' expectations. This revolution doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself on social media. It doesn't organize marches or hold rallies. It happens in the silent moments when someone decides they'd rather be themselves and lonely than be fake and loved. It happens when someone chooses authenticity over approval. When someone realizes that being truly seen is more valuable than being superficially desired. It happens when someone stops asking, "Am I enough for them?" and starts asking, "Are they enough for me?" This revolution is happening one person at a time, one moment of authenticity at a time, one choice to stop performing at a time. And while it's quiet, it's also profound, because each person who breaks free from the validation cycle gives others permission to do the same. Your transformation isn't just personal, it's political. Not in a partisan sense, but in the deeper sense of challenging the power structures that keep people enslaved to others' opinions. Your psychological freedom threatens systems that depend on people being desperate for approval, insecure about their worth, willing to compromise themselves for acceptance. Your silence is more revolutionary than any protest. Your authenticity is more radical than any manifesto. Your refusal to perform is more disruptive than any demonstration, because you're proving that another way is possible. You're showing that people can be whole without external validation, that they can be valuable without being constantly desired, that they can be alive without being constantly performing. She thinks you're different, and she's absolutely right. You are different. You've been reborn in silence, transformed in solitude, recreated in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. The person she knew was a performance, a carefully crafted character designed to be lovable, desirable, controllable. That person was created through years of observation and adaptation, through trial and error, through the gradual development of a persona that could navigate social situations without rocking the boat. But you got tired of being a character in someone else's story. You got exhausted by the constant effort of maintaining an image that wasn't even yours. You realize that all the love in the world doesn't mean anything if it's directed at someone you're only pretending to be. So you stepped out of that story and started writing your own. This new story doesn't have as many supporting characters because not everyone can handle authentic relationship. It doesn't have as much external drama because you're no longer creating chaos to feel alive. It doesn't have as much validation because you're no longer dependent on others for your sense of worth. But it has something the old story never had. It's actually yours. Every choice you make now comes from your authentic desires, rather than your calculated attempts to please others. Every relationship you maintain now feeds your soul rather than draining your energy. Every moment you live now is directed by your inner compass rather than others' expectations. This is what individuation looks like. This is what psychological freedom feels like. This is what it means to be truly alive rather than just performing life. For the first time in your life, you're actually alive. Not performing life. Not pretending to live. Not trying to convince others that you deserve to exist. Not exhausting yourself with the constant effort of being who you think you should be. You're just alive. Breathing without permission. Thinking without approval. Feeling without explanation. Existing without justification. You're taking up space simply because you exist, not because you've earned it through performance. You're expressing opinions because they're yours, not because they'll make others like you more. You're making choices based on your authentic desires, not on your calculations about what will get you the most approval. You're present without agenda. You're connected without desperation. You're loving without conditions. This is what freedom feels like. This is what an unmanipulated mind can do. This is who you actually are when you stop being who others need you to be. And yes, it might be lonely sometimes. Authentic living often is because most people are still trapped in the performance cycle. But it's a different kind of loneliness than what you experienced before. Before, you were lonely even in crowds because no one knew the real you. Now, you might be alone more often, but you're never lonely because you've finally met yourself. You've discovered that you're actually pretty good company. You have interesting thoughts when you're not censoring them. You have genuine feelings when you're not performing them. You have authentic desires when you're not hiding them behind what you think others want to hear. She thinks you're cold, but the truth is, you've just stopped being desperate. You've stopped living for the reflection in others' eyes and started living from the light in your own soul. You've stopped performing love and started being love. You've stopped seeking validation and started generating your own worth. You've stopped being a character and started being yourself. And if that makes them uncomfortable, if that makes you incomprehensible to them, if that makes you dangerous in their eyes, good. Because for the first time in your life, you're not trying to be safe in others' perceptions. You're being real in your own existence. You're not trying to be universally appealing anymore. You're trying to be authentically yourself. You're not trying to avoid all conflict anymore. You're trying to live with integrity. You're not trying to make everyone happy anymore. You're trying to honor your own truth, and that's not cold. That's not distant. That's not wrong. That's alive. That's free. That's who you actually are when you stop being who everyone else needs you to be. Welcome to the first day of your real life. It's going to be different from the life you performed for so long. It might be smaller in some ways. Fewer people, less external validation, more quiet moments. But it's going to be bigger in the ways that matter. Bigger in authenticity. Bigger in meaning. Bigger in the deep satisfaction that comes from living as yourself, rather than as a character designed to please others. She thinks you're cold, but you know the truth. You're not cold. You're just no longer desperate, and that's the most beautiful thing in the world. If this resonated with something deep inside you, if you felt seen in a way that surprised you, take a moment to hit that like button. Not for me, but as a commitment to your own journey toward authentic living. Consider it a promise to yourself that you'll stop performing and start being. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's exhausting themselves trying to be what others want them to be, share it with them. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is remind someone that they don't have to perform to be worthy of love. They don't have to be perfect to be valuable. They don't have to be what everyone wants to be enough. Subscribe if you want more content about reclaiming your authentic self, about living beyond the need for external validation, about the psychology of genuine freedom. Your journey toward authentic existence is just beginning, and there's so much more to explore. Remember, being called cold by people who are used to your performance is not an insult. It's a graduation. It means you've successfully separated your worth from their approval. It means you've found your way home to yourself. And until next time, that's something worth celebrating.